The tale opens with a young boy being ridiculed for his feeble magic. A noble sneers that someone like him will never be favored by magic. To prove his point, the noble unleashes a true spell, engulfing the boy in flames. Yet, instead of despair, the boy marvels at the beauty of the noble's power. Suddenly, he awakens in a grand chamber surrounded by maids. Mistaking them for towering giants, he panics and fires off a fireball, blasting a hole straight through the ceiling. Word spreads across the kingdom celebrating the birth of Prince Loi, the seventh son, while the maids stand in shock. 6 years pass, the maids search frantically for Loi, eventually moving to a different area. As they leave, Loi slips out of hiding but is spotted by 2 young nobles. He pleads with them not to alert the maids, and they agree, inviting him instead to join their hunt. Loi declines and bolts. One noble questions why his companion is so eager to win over Loi, given that a 7th prince has little chance at the throne. The other recalls, however, that even as a baby, Loi was seen reading advanced magic tomes. He believes Loi is the reincarnation of the legendary William Bordeaux. Loi, who overhears this, admits to himself that he truly has reincarnated, though in his past life he was nothing more than a commoner. All he cares about now is magic, so he spends his time in the library, determined to absorb all the knowledge he can. As he reaches for a book, his attendant Sylpha snatches it away, catching him in the act. She insists they resume training, but Loi complains that he has no reason to learn swordsmanship since he is competing for the throne. Sylpha rebukes him, explaining that as royalty he must master it regardless, vowing that his education is her personal mission. Realizing she won't stop until evening if he resists, Loi decides to fight seriously. Their spar continues, and Scylla notes his improvement. Unknown to her, Loi has been cheating using control magic to mirror her movements. Even so, her superior strength overwhelms him. To close the gap, Loi casts physical enhancement and levitation spells. Sylpha acknowledges his growing power as he presses forward. To surprise her, he releases the control spell and prepares a decisive strike that she easily blocks, exposing his trick hand, defeating him. She explains that she could tell the moment he shifted his magic flow. Still, she's impressed, praising his ability to handle 2 spells at once, a feat that even imperial mages struggle with. Loi is relieved she hadn't noticed he was actually juggling 4 spells at once. Later, Loi overhears whispers of a forbidden library containing a sealed demon known as Grimoire, once powerful enough to nearly annihilate an empire. Intrigued, he tracks it down and cloaks himself with concealment magic. As he approaches, he hears the guards, one drowsy, the other warning him to stay alert since the demon's power could shake the kingdom itself. They add that the seal is unbreakable, forged by 10 of the greatest mages. Loi effortlessly shatters it and slips inside, marveling at this hidden section of the castle. While studying, one book suddenly floats, and the demon Grimoire manifests, shocked that a child could breach the seal. He urges Loi to free him in exchange for endless gold. But Loi immediately identifies the gold as shoddy creation magic. Unfazed, he says he'll simply restore the seal once he's done reading, determined to protect the kingdom's knowledge. Grimoire, desperate, swears he means no harm to humans. But when he offers to reveal spells lost to history, Loi's curiosity takes over. Crafting a magical key, he breaks the seal. Once freed, Grimoire demonstrates a spell called Arctis Obscura, its sheer force tearing apart the chamber. Expecting Loi's demise, he is stunned when Loi emerges unscathed, shielded by a barrier. Loi marvels at the ancient magic, so unlike anything he's seen, and demands more. Grimoire unleashes attack after attack, convinced Loi is underestimating him, but his spells cannot pierce the barrier. Fascinated, Loi even touches the destructive magic, feeling both agony and pushed to rage. Grimoire sprouts another head, casting dual spells simultaneously to form a devastating fusion. Loi, analyzing calmly, realizes that demons can surpass human limits by growing extra mouths to handle multiple incantations. Still, Grimoire's strongest assault fails. Grimoire attempts to escape. He discovers he's still trapped within layers of barriers. Loi explains that he preemptively sealed the entire library so his magic wouldn't run wild again. He tests Grimoire further by launching a fireball, incinerating him. Though surprised the demon didn't defend, restoring the library with magic, Loi earns Grimoire's grudging admiration. The demon acknowledges him as master, but Loi, fascinated by his resilience, wonders just how much pain a demon can endure. Horrified, Grimoire hastily pledges loyalty as his familiar. Loi accepts but insists he adopt a less frightening form. Transforming into a cuter figure, Grimoire secretly plots to strike when Loi drops his guard. He hides in Loi's clothes, believing he can control his mind up close only to realize Loi's mana is so overwhelming that he cannot take over. Grimoire decides it's safer to stay obedient for now, so he tells Loi to call him Grim, and he officially becomes Loi's familiar. Not long after, the second prince, Albert, prepares himself and comes to visit Loi. Grim quickly hides upon his arrival. They head together to the training grounds, where Albert demonstrates his skill, striking targets with his magic. Loi quietly tells Grim that Albert is both intelligent and powerful, which is why the nobles believe he'll be the next king. When Albert finishes, he calls for Loi to take his turn. Loi hesitates, deciding he shouldn't attract too much attention, as he doesn't want to be caught up in the succession struggle. So, he deliberately only grazes the targets. The nobles watching dismiss him as unimpressive, assuming he lacks skill. Grim, however, mutters that they're blind and able to see that Lloyd had struck the targets in an identical manner each time, which is far more difficult than hitting them randomly. Albert appears to notice something and decides to take a break, leaving Lloyd alone in the field. Lloyd can't believe his luck, an entire empty training ground all to himself. Excited, he says he wants to test out some new techniques, like the dual enchantment Grim had once shown him. Grim immediately protests, insisting that dual enchantment is something only demons can do. But Lloyd shrugs it off and boldly absorbs Grim into his own body. The demon cries out in panic, demanding who in their right mind would merge with a demon, but Lloyd beams with joy at his success. The two begin reciting together, but Grim is overwhelmed, screaming in disbelief at what Lloyd is doing. Lloyd calmly explains he's experimenting with spell stacking, compressing multiple incantations into a single shortened form, which reduces casting time. He proudly adds that his aim is to stack 100 enchantments. Grim nearly loses his mind, shouting that even 2 or 3 stacked enchantments are considered the limit. Lloyd then tries something new and manages to speak directly through Grim's mouth. Using this trick, he attempts to cast 2 advanced spells at once, a water spell and a fire spell simultaneously. Grim is horrified that he would attempt to merge 2 completely different elements. Lloyd feels the immense power surging through him, and wisely decides not to aim it at anything nearby, instead releasing the spell into the sky. Meanwhile, Albert enjoys tea with the ministers. They question why he pays so much attention to Lloyd, dismissing him as just a child. Albert calmly tells them they lack an eye for true talent. He explains that Lloyd deliberately hit all the targets the same way, proving his precision, and declares Lloyd to be a prodigy destined to become a great sage and an invaluable asset to the kingdom. The ministers commend Albert's keen perception. Albert wonders whether Lloyd managed to strike every single target, but before the ministers can answer, they notice the sky darkening. Back on the training field, the ground is wrecked, and Grim trembles in fear Lloyd has blasted a hole in the sky itself. Though awestruck by the magic, Lloyd begins to panic, wondering how he can possibly repair such damage. Luckily, the gaping void vanishes on its own after a short while. The following day, Grim reads the newspaper and sees reports about the hole in the heavens, but Lloyd barely pays attention, far more intrigued by a group of adventurers who cleared an unranked dungeon. He sees this as a chance to collect magical items and announces he'll head to a dungeon himself. Grim protests immediately, warning that his absence will be noticed. But Lloyd assures him he can handle it, producing a pellet that creates a perfect clone of himself. Grim is stunned at the flawless duplicate and admits it could work, but warns that it won't be enough to deceive Silpha. Lloyd just grins, saying he has a plan. We see Lloyd leaving the castle, while still conversing with Grim from a distance. Grim tries his best to mimic Lloyd's mannerisms, recalling how Lloyd placed his consciousness inside the clone and his physical body into Lloyd's hand. He can't help but admit Lloyd is frighteningly ingenious. Lloyd asks Grim to keep Scylla distracted while he explores the dungeon. Grim briefly considers taking advantage of Lloyd's absence to do whatever he pleases, but when Lloyd sincerely thanks him for being a reliable familiar, Grim is unexpectedly touched and tells Lloyd to return safely. Out in the wild, Lloyd searches for a dungeon when he spots a girl fleeing from a pack of orcs. Suddenly, she counterattacks, taking them down with precise movements. Loi quickly realizes she's channeling her breathing. Just as he once read about fighters in foreign lands use a technique called ki. The girl notices Loi watching and rushes toward him, ready to fight. Grim reminds Loi that he can't let her discover his identity as the seventh prince, so Loi changes his appearance before she reaches him. Introducing himself as Robert, Loi explains that he used an illusion spell. The spell only works if he's already seen the person before, so he cleverly combined it with a double incantation to fuse his appearance with Albert's. The girl introduces herself as Dao, a lively adventurer who blushes. After 18 years of training, she proclaims she's finally found someone she wants to be with and immediately decides he should be her boyfriend. Loi awkwardly explains he was only looking for a dungeon, and Dao enthusiastically offers to guide him. They soon arrive at a dungeon where Dao swiftly slaughters the monsters. She beams, hoping to impress him, but Loi is more fascinated by the glittering stones scattered throughout. Taking a break, Loi curiously asks about ki. Surprised that he even knows the term, Dao explains that ki flows through breathing, granting users supernatural abilities, though it requires endless practice. Mid-conversation, she catches him imitating her breathing. Alarmed, she asks what he's doing. Loi admits he's trying it for himself. She scolds him, worried he's hurting himself, but he ignores the discomfort, fascinated by the unfamiliar energy distinct from mana. Dao is touched by his genuine curiosity and decides to formally teach him about ki, secretly captivated by his looks. She tells him to keep practicing his breathing. Meanwhile, back at the castle, Grin shakes his head at Loi's reckless nature, wondering why he doesn't appreciate his royal privileges. Suddenly, Sifla appears behind him, and Grim panics. Back in the dungeon, Dao continues cutting through enemies and explains that she once defeated the dungeon boss with a single key burst. They approach the treasure chamber, but Dao warns the loot won't be worthwhile since the dungeon is low tier. Dao notes his breathing has already become natural, remarking that even her grandfather would approve of him as her fiancé. As they open the chest, a sudden attack erupts. Loi quickly shields Dao as a lich emerges. Shocked, Dao remarks that a lich has no business appearing in such a weak dungeon after all. Even elite adventurers struggle to handle one. She urges Loi to flee while she holds it off, but Loi insists on watching the battle. To force him away, she attacks him, sending him flying. The lich mocks her use of ki as nothing more than a cheap imitation of magic. He boasts that he devours the souls of adventurers to steal their powers, dismissing her as unworthy of consumption. He wonders aloud if Loi is more valuable, considering he dodged the lich's ambush earlier. Dao recognizes that both Loi and the lich are seekers of knowledge, but their outlooks are opposite. Loi treasures even the smallest discovery, while the lich consumes only for greed. She smiles, happy that Loi finds ki impressive, unlike the locals who scorn it as weak. Dao launches an all-out assault. Her relentless training shines as she shatters his barrier with a devastating ki burst. But she collapses, exhausted, realizing the lich dodged the fatal blow. He sneers, declaring her life wasted in fruitless training, and prepares a finishing spell. Before the attack can land, the ground fractures, and Lodi reappears, shielding her with his barrier. Calmly, he tells her to rest while he takes over. The lich begins chanting another spell, but Loi vanishes, reappearing behind him. Shocked, the lich can't fathom how Loi used magic without any incantation. Dao realizes in awe that Loi is blending magic with ki. The lich launches a barrage, but Loi practices mid-battle, fusing ki and mana. At one point, his barrier blocks his own airflow, forcing him to cancel it. The lich then unleashes a combined spell, but Loi dodges flawlessly using ki-enhanced movement. Focusing, he finally merges mana with ki, using it to repel the lich's attacks. Though the fusion feels incomplete, he presses on with rapid ki bursts, stunning the lich, who cannot believe enchantment. 3 strikes could be so powerful. Perfecting the rhythm, Loi slices the lich in half, defeating him. Dao gazes at him in admiration. But that's all for today. Comment if you want more of this series.